All right, we will continue where we left off. Bloomfield School Board of Education meeting, July 17th. Item 3B, Carol Diglio, Education Leadership and Human Resources Consultant from Plymouth, Michigan. So, good evening.
Good evening.
On behalf of Bloomfield Schools, I'd like to welcome you to this interview for the position of superintendent. Ms. Diglio is currently an independent education, leadership, and human resources consultant here in Michigan. I'd like to take a few moments to briefly describe our format. The interview may take up to 90 minutes. There will be 21 questions from the board. Towards the end of the interview, time permitting, we will give you the opportunity to ask questions to the board and make a closing statement. We will let you know if time is becoming an issue and if there's a need to pick up the pace of responses.
Okay.
For those viewing this interview, we welcome your feedback, whether present in the audience or watching via live stream or video. You may use the QR code provided for this purpose. Although the task of choosing our next superintendent is the responsibility of the Board of Education as elected representatives for this community, we value and seriously consider the input from our stakeholders in this process. So I'll start out with my first question, Ms. Diglio. While we've had the opportunity to review your application materials, the audience members have not.
Okay.
Could you please briefly review your background and share what causes you to be interested in this position at this point in your career?
Thank you very much. And hello, Ms. Megan Hill. Good to meet you. I had a chance to meet everybody as they walked in, so good to meet you as well. Thank you for having me this evening. I'm entering my 34th year in education. What qualifies me to be here and why I'm here is I have a background in education. I have a Bachelor's of Science from Central Michigan University. I have a health education major and a science minor, and that allowed me to be a teacher for 14 years. I have a master's in administration from Central as well, and I have an educational specialist from Eastern Michigan University, and I also have a certification from Michigan State University as a certified HR specialist. I am currently certified. I keep my certifications up to date for education and a certification for administration in the state of Michigan. But the real education, I believe, is the work. I've spent 34 years in education. I have a little bit of a unique change in the fact that I did retire in 2017, and I'll explain that a little bit when I get there. But I started my career subbing, like many teachers did back in the 80s and early 90s. But after 2 years of subbing, I went down to Houston, Texas, where I taught in a urban school district that had many challenges, and learned much more from kids than I think kids learned from me at that time. I learned what it meant to grow up in poverty. I learned from kids who were first-generation migrants. I learned from English second language learners. And I also learned a great deal of the inequity there is in education. And that taught me a lot, and I feel like it was yesterday. When I returned back to Michigan, I taught an alternative education for 2 years. I taught 5 different topics, but I taught kids from 18 different school districts that were thrown out of their schools for various reasons. I also taught adults who wanted a second chance, and those adults became second parents to the kids that needed a second parent at the time. And at the time that I was working in alternative ed, I was waiting tables, working on my master's, and I got a coaching job in Novi. And that coaching job eventually led to a teaching job. I spent 8 years teaching and leading the health department at Novi High School, wore various hats along the way. And after 8 years of teaching and coaching, I went into administration. I was a dean of students for 3 years. I was a dean of students and assistant principal for a year as we had an assistant principal leave. mid-year, and so I took on his responsibilities, and that's where, if I go back to you learn by doing, and that's the real education, that's where I learned to do a lot of master scheduling and big picture systems for the school that eventually trickled into the district. After that year of doing both, I became an assistant principal for 3 years, and then eventually became the high school principal, which I absolutely loved, all roles. As the high school principal, I think there are defining moments in your careers, and that was one. It was a difficult time. It was the recession. I lost 8% of my staff, department chairs. I see that the high school here is on a block schedule. It's one of the best schedules kids can learn in, but we had to give our block schedule up and move to the 6-period day for financial reasons. And so there were a lot of challenges, and I had to also implement an IB program, which was hard for people to swallow, that we were getting rid of the block schedule, but we were adopting IB, and so I had to marry those two. And really, that is where I had to really step back and, while figuring things out, understand how important it is to really collaborate with the people who are in the seats doing the job. And I've always saw that, but in that time, there were a lot of tears that year with people, and a lot of grief, but it was more about collaboration, team building, relying on each other, and that's really where I started this notion of what's working, always focusing on the positive, what's not working, and how do we get there as a team. And that's kind of carried through all of my different roles. In the third year, as we got things in a good place, and it does, as we know, take 3 to 6 years sometimes for significant change, I was asked by the superintendent at the time, Dr. Matthews, to step into the Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources role. We had a retirement mid-year, and so I took on the responsibilities of being the Assistant Superintendent while keeping my foot at the high school for 6 months. So I learned to juggle a lot. It was hard to just separate from the high school, because all of those end-of-the-year activities, I still needed to support, evaluations, all that great stuff that high school principals do, while building systems at the board office in the role of human resources. So I did that starting in 2013, and revamped and learned to grow into systems, but I think some people have that systematic brain, but you have to teach that. When you are looking for success, and I think early in my career, just before I became a principal, Novi was the 44th school district in the state, and it remains number 1, number 2 often, and it is because of the hard work and the vision of working together as a group, a team across the district, not in silos, but across the district, that gets momentum that eventually will always benefit kids first. You always want to get to the point of every decision you make and pivot you have to make, whether it's finances or changes in curriculum or whatever it might be at the state level or even the district level. You have to have clear expectations for everyone that works together on that team and move forward in succession for the benefit of kids. So I did that for 4 years and absolutely loved it, and had spent 23 years in that district. I did retire in 2017. I worked a lot and put myself in a lot of positions at the state level, and I wanted to help people who were in my roles that didn't get an opportunity to learn or are learning by fire, which happens a lot in administration. So I took November, about 2.5 months off, and then I went opened my consulting, which was in a focus on educational leadership and human resources. Through a Twitter, I was picked up by MASA and MASSP, which are the state associations, and I started to go to Lansing on a regular basis, working workshops for information and system building for districts across the state. I also joined 2 state committees. I wanted to give back to the Michigan Department of Education. I wanted to see from a different lens. So I spent a lot of time in Lansing in 2018, going back and forth and just giving back. through my consulting company, often there would be 1 or 2 administrators from a district that would come and be part of my workshops. They would often ask me back to come to their whole district, so I'd work in teams, and I loved that aspect. So then we would take what they learned, a single person, back to the district and grow it with the whole group. So I did that and booked out quite far into the year, but then I got a call from a very dear colleague and friend who was taking their first superintendent position in Oak Park. And when she entered that position, there were some vacancies that she needed support with right away. So she had asked me to come and support her, Dr. Hitchcock, who also is a parent in the community. She asked me to come support her, and I was happy to do so, thinking it would be about 3 weeks to 3 months. And I ended up staying for 3 years. So I very much, although I retired, I never left the educational setting. I always want to find ways of giving back and helping to grow. So I spent 3 years in Oak Park, and through some really tumultuous times, of course, during COVID, with some extenuating circumstances with online learning and things like that, that might be easy for some districts to transition to, but in Oak Park, we had to deploy 3,000 laptops to kids so that we could get that started. So there were a lot of different challenges, but again, going back to building teams, teaching clarity. I love the quote, "Clear is kind," by Brene Brown, because as long as we're clear and working together, I think anything can happen. And in Oak Park, so many great things happened, even though it was a different challenge. One of the things I learned in that 34 years, I started in an urban setting, and my most recent district is in an urban setting, and we have not gotten vastly better with inequity in certain settings in education. And so I have a passion for that, and I'll continue to fight for kids until I can't fight anymore. So I spent 3 years, in 3 exact years, and in October I retired again and went immediately back to helping districts in my consulting business, and took on a district that I worked with several months and still am connected with. And then that brought me here today. So 34 years later, I'm here. My interest lies solely in purpose. My purpose for the love of kids, my purpose for the love of education, and my passion to continue to do what I love to do in any setting. I will go anywhere and help anywhere, and I think this is my next opportunity. So that's what brings me here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What are the immediate challenges you would expect to face as our superintendent? And given these, tell us how you hit the ground running in your first day and be ready to address these challenges.
So the immediate challenge when I look at the timeline is the opening of the school year. I'm going to leave you a 100-day plan. Don't let it scare you. It's a snapshot inside my brain. But there are several things that need to be done between now and the opening of the school year, especially when you have a bond and many active construction sites. So there's this balance of the beauty of the facilities, and opening things is very fun, but there's this side of anxious teachers and administrators, paraprofessionals, and children that want to get in and start setting things up. So the immediate challenges is looking at the timeline, and then making sure that the teams are working together and things are in place right now that are going to allow for that back to school professional development, that week of when you bring the staff back, and ultimately making sure that September 5th is a complete success for kids and families. So that's that immediate challenge. Whenever you have a bond, it's exciting, and construction's exciting. Some other immediate challenges in a short window of time is getting to know people. And I understand that you recently have an interim superintendent, which is great. That's going to be very helpful. It's going to be helpful for your staff in place. And there's some other, when I look at challenges, I looked at some of your other vacancies. So when you have a CFO that you have to fill, a director of finance, I'm not sure where things are in the process, but I also noticed that the transportation manager is vacant. If that's the case, you have buses that need to launch right away. So those are things that if I was to get this job and if it starts mid-August, there's going to be multiple things going on simultaneously. And a big priority is getting to know all of you folks sitting here. We have to work as a team as well. So making sure that we're developing our relationship, making sure that we are getting on the same page in terms of communication mode, agenda, and things like that. It's also looking at all of the cabinet, the administrators at the building level, and supporting them so that the doors open September 6th without a hitch. That's what I would look at. And what the challenges, I would say the biggest challenge are some of those vacancies and your construction.
Thank you. Given your research and what you know of our district, what do you believe the 2 or 3 most critical long-term priorities we will need to address? And how would your background and skills help us address those priorities?
I think right now in education, that there are some challenges, and in my research, a long-term priority for kids is really sustainability of the educators. There is a critical shortage of educators, and it is everything: bus drivers, paras, the works. There is not a district that is immune to the teacher shortage and educator shortage, in not only just the state, but in the nation. Done a lot of research in that area. It's a very huge concern of mine. It is something that I focus on quite a bit. I think right away what we need to do is we need to retain our employees. There's got to be a lot of effort of retaining who we have in place that are great for kids. The long term of that, and this is not a single Bloomfield Hills concern. The long term is the pipelines of getting young people interested in being educators again and coming through. So that is a looming problem over the field, but it is impacting every district, including Bloomfield Hills. Again, I looked at a lot of things on there, and there are vacancies. There's classrooms that need to be filled before September 5th. The change in that is people are leaving mid-year. There's a lot of turnover. And that turnover in the classroom directly impacts students, directly impacts that change, that when you lose a teacher mid-year and you have a sub in place, that has a huge impact. So that's one. Retaining our good educators and leaders that are in place right now. There's a lot of other areas that I work about. I think about students in general. You have so many vast opportunities for kids. Your success rate's very high. And I think you educate the 0 to 26 child and student, which is amazing. One of the things I wonder is when you have high performing, you have AP and IB programs, and you have kids of all abilities, I really wonder about long-term the kids that want to do something different than automatically go to a 4-year college. The trades, working with your hands, technology. Not all technology needs an immediate 4-year degree. I long-term have been looking and wondering, where can we meet the needs of kids? You hear about gap years. Well, what are kids doing in gap years? Man, it would be great if kids were experimenting in different areas of working with their hands in a trade. And how do we bring that back into schools? When the Michigan Merit Curriculum changed in 2010, it really took a hit on the elective classes. So kids, I am all about high expectations, but we went from requiring 1 state credit to 18, and not all kids fit in that box. I want every kid to find their space, not only in school, but in society, and give back in a way that they're proud of. And so I think, where do we look at, how do we look at that the skills that we're offering kids that aren't necessarily driven in an English, math class, science, social studies, the requirements, how they can use those requirements in different ways. And I think you have a lot of opportunity, and you're already offering a lot to make a little bit of a pivot for long-term gains for kids.
Thank you.
John? Thank you for your responses so far. What is your experience with threat assessments? What have you learned, and what have you learned from those experiences?
Understandably, I understand the question. I've had a lot of experience with threat assessments at the school level, the district level, in crisis with individual kids, individual families. This is something that we have to be very vigilant with in every school district. And my experience really started back in 2003 when I became a dean. I oversaw the safety and security of schools, and during that time, as early as it was, partnered with the police department to do a simulated school shooting. And it was very emotional, and it engaged kids, parents, and the community. And from that, it led to lots of threat assessment protocols, and I would say proactive things, numbering all the doors inside and out, making sure that we have updated practices, all of that. So I've been working with threat assessments for a long time. My most recent district, we had some unfortunate experiences with that, and managed them very well. What I learned from this experience is that it's better to be proactive than reactive. It's better to have things in place that put in boundaries so that it reduces the risk, and that you have to really make sure that this is systemically something that everyone takes seriously across the entire district. You gotta, it's just part of education now. As sad as it makes me, it's what we do. And it is something where we have to be proactive and not reactive.
Superintendents are often faced with the challenge of making decisions when there is no clear right answer, and members of the community are split on the right path forward. Mm-hmm. Talk about a time when you were faced with a difficult decision where you knew there would be a group of people unhappy with your decision no matter what you chose to do. How did you go about making that decision and getting people on board with the direction you determined was best?
We are often faced with that, and when you're working with a large community and 5,000 plus families, what you have to look at is the impact it has on students immediately and how many students. I think it's really important that sometimes you have to be reactive and make a decision with the most information at the time. And when that's done, to go back and work with people to help them understand. And you don't always get those moments in the immediate time. You don't have the time, but you're the professional in place responsible to make that decision. And so you make that decision and you get through the unfortunate circumstance, but then you explain the why. There's been lots of decisions where I've had to split this. Programming is one of them, when you have to make a decision that there are not enough students taking a certain class to keep it going. It's not fiscally responsible for the district. And so some strategies that I would work at both the building level and district level is, can we make this work by teaching more than one class? So Art 1, Art 2, or multiple classes. And it can work for a period of time, but you have to make decisions that are best for the entire district at that time. So having conversations and telling the why, and bringing people in and collaborating, saying, is there something I'm missing or not seeing afterwards, to see if you can make an adjustment that way. But it is it's the nature of the beast. We are going to have to make decisions that not everyone's going to be happy with, but the communication of that and how we manage it is the important part.
What impact has the use of standardized testing results had on our public education system?
I think this has a major impact in a positive way when it's used positively. It can also be very stressful. But really what standardized testing allows us to do is to make educational decisions that are best for kids, and drilling down to specific skill sets. So when you have measurements, and you have common measurements, and we're measuring apples to apples, oranges to oranges, and you're using these tests at the classroom level for teachers to make adjustments throughout the year, not getting these in seasons, that they have these tools at the classroom level where they can see individually what kids need support on, and they can make adjustments on the spot. That's the power and the impact of that. That allows us to do our job and make adjustments day to day, if need be. It allows us to talk as a district to say, what are some additional interventions that we can use? It allows us to make decisions about methodology, and allows us to make decisions about strategy. It allows us to make decisions about furniture, simple things, manipulations, all of that, if we're using it correctly and using it on a regular basis to have an impact in the classroom.
Trustee Hill?
Thank you. How do you think various stakeholders, such as parents, staff members, and community members, should be involved in our planning process and in setting direction for the district?
So it's a community school district, and it's a public school district. I think there has to be stakeholder voice from all of these parties, because we are creating and delivering the foundational education for kids. And so you want there to be information coming in and shared. It can't just be a one-way street. It has to be collaborative, and it has to serve the community and their needs. This is not a school of choice. People make conscious decisions to come in the district, and they make a decision for what is best for their kids and their educational future. So there's lots of ways you can do that. Strategic planning is a really good way of getting a lot of stakeholders. I see that you have very active PTOs, and there has to be community partnerships. That really helps kids, that when you have community partnerships and we have kids that want to explore, or you want partners to come into the school to help introduce things. There's so many things that can happen. There has to be, though, a clear foundation in line that you have administrators in place, and they also, and this is the why, they also have to follow state and Michigan Department of Education regulations. So having that behind and the balance, and also the experience and education that they bring to the table for all of the stakeholders, is important to have that balance of two-way communication. They can be very powerful, and it should be in place.
Thank you. How do we create a district-wide culture of continuous improvement, planning strategically, and aligning our actions to achieve strategic outcomes?
This is a great question, because I don't believe in doing anything that isn't going to be enacted on or executed. So when you do things as a district or any organization, you have lots of things in place that make you tick. Those all in how you create a district-wide culture is making sure that this is a living, breathing document, that is something we're living into, that we're looking at often, that we are going back and checking, that it's visible, that people can find it, see it. I noticed your portrait of a learner signs in front of everybody. I noticed that when watching board meetings, that's visible information about what you're about as a district, and it has to be something that you live into. It can't be something you create and put on a shelf. It just can't. And so that culture is built by relentless follow-through, schedules of visiting and revisiting, short-term goals. And I looked at your plan, I think yesterday or this morning, and you have things moving in a great direction. But it just can't be a document. We have to live into it and make a difference and use that data to make sure that it is aligning with your strategic planning and the outcomes that you want for kids.
Thank you. Effective and timely communication is vital to the success of a school district. Please describe the type of communication students, staff, parents, and the board should expect to receive from you.
So each level is going to be different. Students, I would rely heavily on my communication being more visible. Going to school, having a monthly rotation of being in the buildings, getting to know kids on that level, engaging in their after-school activities. I love sports, musicals, going to band events. Like that communication, I would have expectations for their building principals to make sure that they're being clearly communicated to on a regular basis about the happenings of their building. I would see my communication more on a face-to-face basis, and sometimes little notes when kids have done really great things, or high school kids that just, or even elementary kids, where there's things that are going on where I can be involved in, or sending little notes that way. Staff, that is going to be on a regular basis through their administrators as well, because I look at it as my priority of communication is going to be with the board and the cabinet, so that we are on the same page with communication. I see having bi-weekly meetings or monthly meetings with the building administrators so that we work out that communication, and then having parent updates on a more of a monthly basis. Being new, it might be a little bit more frequent. Communication is super critical. When we're looking at an event that is out of the ordinary, there has to be succinct communication that goes out immediately. So I'm looking at this as two pieces. One, the regular, annual, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, but then the communication that needs to be done if there's an emergency or something out of the ordinary, and parents need to be informed immediately. There has to be a very succinct chain of events that occur so that that information goes out accurately and in a timely manner. That takes some time that's kind of a dance. And so I'd like to hear what folks are used to or not used to, what worked, what didn't work, and kind of build on that as far as the annual. And then there's the emergency side. There's two pieces there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for spending some time with us here tonight. How would you ensure that our district's spending is aligned with our priorities?
It's a great question. So school finance is so critical on so many levels, and what you want to identify and align with, this goes into your strategic planning and your district goals. I come from the background as you want the most going in front of children. So making sure that your programming, your curriculum, your technology, your staffing, all of that is going in front of kids. And so you ensure that the district spending is aligned with your budget that is being built throughout the year and has to be approved by you by the end of June. There's lots of different things that we can spend money on, but you have to look at what are your goals and are we fiscally responsible with that, the money on the other side, so that they stay aligned. The most money is spent on staffing. That's just school. 85% of your budget is going to go to staff. That's not unusual. That's in every district. And it's that other 16% that you have to make sure we're getting the most benefit in the classroom and through the measurements that you have in place for your goals. Opportunities for kids, success for kids, facilities. Gosh, there's so many great things in here. You guys have a farm and a nature center. I can go on because every kid deserves this opportunity. But it is watching and working closely with the CFO and making sure that we are making decisions with the board and the district on how we're going to make those decisions on spending money.
Thank you. What opportunities do you believe budget limitations present? In tough financial times, what are your top 3 priorities?
So budget limitations, unfortunately, because so much money is spent on staffing, we have to cut staff, and then class sizes get larger, and that directly impacts kids. Some budget limitation when you're cutting staff, it often starts with staff that have such a deep impact. All staff do, but we've seen social workers and psychologists and counselors be cut first, and now what do we see? We need social emotional support more than ever. So those budget limitations can impact the classroom immediately because it impacts staff. And so during tough financials, what are your top 3 priorities? Making sure it impacts kids the least amount on how we do that. Prioritize where we're spending and what are our needs versus our wants. Sometimes when we look at that, our needs versus our wants as a district, at every building level and every program level, you can find some things that we can live without. And then making sure that not just the individual classroom, but really important programs aren't getting cut. I went through this before. It was very, very painful and difficult. But our priority stayed with keeping kids first.
Okay, thank you. Please describe your experiences with millage renewals, bond proposals, and sinking fund proposals. Were these experiences successful? Why or why not?
So I have experience on the fringe. So I've been in a central office role where they've always been successful. I understand the impact of them. Bonds can do so many wonderful things in districts, and sometimes they're needed just to keep things in a good place. The sinking fund is very restricted. It's for, you're going to use it for things that are the less glamorous, like a new roof. So while I haven't been the one that's had to run that or be behind it solely or pushing it from my perspective, I understand the importance. In Oak Park, we passed a bond for the first time in many, many years that had immediate impact on kids. So that was one of the great successes. But I've been around it and understand it well enough to know the importance and that it has impact on the budget. The more you can use those items to help the district, the less it'll impact the general fund. And those are all good things.
Okay, thank you.
Before we
Yeah.
transfer over, I'll just let you know, we're 12 questions in out of 21, so there's 9 to go in about 50 minutes, 5-0.
15 minutes?
5-0. 50.
5-0, oh
So
my
you're
gosh.
awesome.
John, you scared me. I was like, oh my God. Okay, thank you.
On to you,
Trustee Noble?
Appreciate the time.
So great for you to be here, and I want to ask you a question about personnel. And how would you interact with other administrators in our district? How would you strike a balance between giving them the support and autonomy they need to lead effectively while holding them accountable as appropriate and necessary?
The most important thing that I need to do as a leader with administrators and all staff is be very clear in expectations. It is unfair to hold people accountable if they don't know what they're being held accountable for. So that would be the reason why we would meet on a very regular basis, so that not only are we living into things that are in place already, but that we get to know each other and they understand my level of expectations and my transparency of what that is, and teaching. There will, definitely be some sessions where it is teaching and learning with each other of what those expectations are. But if you don't hold people accountable when it's appropriate, the same behavior will happen over and over and over again, and you won't see change. And I really look at it as letting my administrator down because I didn't care enough to grow them. And if I don't care enough to grow them, then I'm not caring enough to grow kids. So you have to look at their impact at the building level and what they're responsible for, and I'm responsible to make sure they're their best self and growing them and giving them opportunity to grow. People look at accountability. I literally used to do a session up at MASSP and MASA called Accountability is Not a Dirty Word. It's not. It's just being clear. And when you've had opportunities to live into clear expectations, you've had opportunities to grow, and you choose not to do what is asked of you or what the expectations are, there has to be a different behavior. There has to be a different behavior from me, because we'll just see the same behavior over and over again if I don't hold people accountable. I would expect the same from my team. My cabinet to hold their folks accountable, my principals and assistant principals to hold their folks accountable, teachers to hold children accountable. It is very, it becomes very clear as kind. It becomes a very, it doesn't have to be about conflict. It has to be about growth.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Please describe your most successful experience with building a high-performing work team.
Most successful experience. I'm going to pick a recent experience. While I might go back to my principal work, I kind of want to come more current. At Oak Park, there were a lot of deficits in terms of personnel and the concept of team. When I was asked to come and help in HR, one of the reasons why I was able to stay 3 years is the state of Michigan put me on the critical shortage list within 24 hours, which was unheard of. There's steps you have to take to get on the critical shortage list, and I got the stamp of approval. So coming into a district where they had not had concentrated human resources for almost 10 years, the only way that was going to get momentum and change was through teamwork. So it was through building small systems one step at a time. I had a really great HR manager and was able to bring in an executive assistant, and our little triangle married with the business and finance department. And then we started to work together to help build systems for the superintendent while she was doing her work. And so getting that momentum in and breaking things down in digestible bites, one system at a time. There at one time was 56 vacancies in a small district. And there wasn't a very transparent hiring process. So I loved bringing in a process I created, but teaching it and modeling it with all the building principals so that they wanted to model and do the same thing in their buildings. So that was, to me, what it's all about, that we were the little engine that could, and started small, but we just kept building momentum. And it was so great to watch the principals just get a sense of pride and confidence, and extremely high expectations, because it's a difficult process. It's really about finding the best people to be in front of kids. And so that to me was a lot of fun.
Thank you. Next question is, what would you suggest in terms of a comprehensive professional development plan for our educators? Specifically, what would be the key priority areas as well as the delivery system? So the most important thing I can do is evaluate the educators. I need to know what is the most recent professional development, how current are they in certain areas. So if we're talking about a comprehensive professional development plan, I would start with the strategic plan and your SIP, your school improvement plan. So I would start there and start with the cabinet members, especially teaching and learning, to see what has gone on, because nothing's worse than sitting through a PD that you've already sat through, or something that we did this 10 years ago. I would really have to evaluate what has been the professional development plan over years. I'd also look at what are some current things that are going on that people can benefit from, but a comprehensive professional development can't be one in and out. There's a lot of work, I know, in this district and other districts around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that work is great, wonderful work, but it has to be over time. It has to be exactly what you're asking, comprehensive. So I'll give you an example. When I was a high school principal, I started an opening day around diversity, equity, and inclusion with the whole staff. But then I had that same Dr. Marks from Oakland Schools come in on a very annual basis where teachers and paraprofessionals would come down on their conference period. So he would give sessions, little mini sessions, so that we didn't have to wait for the next PD. So we have to be really creative of how you keep that going. So instead of just having this opening day speaker, our opening day speaker, we had a curriculum that went all the way through 2 years.
And so he would come back on a regular basis and work with the staff. And whatever we're working out with the staff, we have to make sure that we're also including kids, and that's hard to do sometimes. But I need to know where are you in the professional development, what has been done, and I assess, like I survey and say, what do you need? Have you had this? Now, there are things that are required by law, like Title IX training is critical. So we would, of course, take care of that as part of our comprehensive professional development. But what do we need to make sure that our school improvement plan is moving forward? That our teaching and learning strategies are staying fresh and current. And the other thing, I know I'm kind of long-winded here, the thing I worry about too is we forget a whole set of people, which are our paraprofessionals, our bus drivers, our secretaries, all of our folks that interact with kids every single day. And a lot of times we'll go to professional development, but they don't get to go anywhere. Or they're told to just go with, now that might not be the case here, but that's something to think about of comprehensive professional development. Because every single person that are walking in your schools are impacting kids. Somehow, some way, they're connecting with kids. And so that to me is comprehensive.
Trustee Colin?
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time. And congratulations for making it this far in the process.
Thank you.
So first question is, what experience and success have you had with closing the achievement gap for economically disadvantaged and minority students?
So this is a challenge in every district. And this is where we go back to the data question and drilling down that we're looking at those subgroups, economically disadvantaged, minority groups. We have to drill down and look at those. But one thing that I would say most recently had success in is in my most current district, there were a lot of folks that had roles that weren't well defined. And they were in lots of buildings, and they were there to support kids and close the achievement gap, but didn't necessarily have the education or skill set. And I say that with the kindest heart, not their fault. But when you look at data and you look at economically disadvantaged and low scores, how can you take a group of people that are physically there but not necessarily having a tremendous impact on closing the achievement gap, and then you learn that there are no media center specialists, and there's a read by 3 law, and you learn that there aren't folks in place that are in each building to give support in terms of curriculum. So one of the things that we did that I believe was successful, and I won't see the true success for time, is we made some really difficult decisions and eliminated about 29 positions to bring back certified, qualified media center specialists in every building, and to bring in content area leaders and instructional coaches in every building. So it kind of marries into a question I had earlier. We had to make a very difficult decision. Some of those folks have been there for a long time, but time is of the essence, and our kids deserve to have things in place that were needed to address this issue.
Thank you. Please give us an example of an educational change or reform that you have initiated in your career that have led to improvements in student learning.
So if we're looking at it's hard to marry this. I'm going to go in this route. I can go back to my principal, but I'm going to go to the hiring process. And while it may not be labeled as a change of reform, I think it did make big changes in improvement of student learning, and that is having and putting in place a very comprehensive hiring process that has several tools that measure the strength of individuals that are coming in front of kids, whether it is to be a paraeducator, a teacher, a psychologist, a social worker, counselor, all of those roles, to have a very aligned, equally important, everyone's going to go through the same steps, transparency and team decisions around bringing people in front of children so that our kids have the best opportunity to learn from the best. And that becomes more challenging with the teacher shortage, but that change, and I've seen it over and improve in 2 different districts, that change makes a big difference when it comes to student learning and just having really good people in front of kids. Like, just really good people that are here for the right reasons. So I would say that has made a big difference, a game changer.
What is the biggest risk you have taken to do what's right for children?
If I go back to COVID, in the district I was in, it shut down for 18 months. There's lots of reasons why and complications, and it was the best decision for kids. The superintendent led that, was very brave, but there are challenges. I touched on it a little bit. Our kids did not have technology at home, and not only technology, a lot of them didn't have Wi-Fi. Things that we might take for granted, they didn't have. So the risk that I had to take was, during this pandemic that we knew little about, I led the deployment process of getting 3,000 computers out. So that meant every day I set up an AM and PM, 10 people at a time, spread out throughout the media center and the high school, worked with technology. Now think technology had to take 3,000 computers and take them and make them Chrome, like Google's, they had to put Google on the computers. There was a lot of layers, but sitting in there and reaching out to staff and asking them in a very dangerous time to please come in and individually pack computers and get them to kids. I didn't feel like I was at risk, but looking back at it, I didn't hesitate. I masked up and had gloves on, of course, and had to make everyone else feel comfortable to come in and do it. And it wasn't easy because there were so many unknowns. And people rose to the occasion, and we got 3,000 computers out. It took about 2 weeks because they all had to be hand-packed. And I would do it again. I mean, I would do it all over again.
Please describe your typical style of leading and talk about situations in which you might vary from that style.
So my typical style is starting with relationship building. I mean, I need to make that connection with people and understand their strengths and areas that they want to grow in, and I need to share the same. I need to be vulnerable with them. My style is, I am in a position to be a leader, and I need to lead. So I understand that, and I take it very seriously, but I'm clear in those expectations. And that is a big part of my style. I am very transparent and will communicate and take time to grow but I do expect people and hold them accountable I think in a very caring way. But I lead knowing that this is a big operation that needs a lot of direction and clear systems in place. And I am all about helping to build that and live into it. So on the other side of that, I'm extremely collaborative. And my style is to empower people and help them to fly and hold them accountable for flying. And if I wasn't clear enough, I live into, I don't have to be right, I need to get it right. And I live into that. I'm gonna make mistakes. I'll say that to you today. I mean, we are human, but to me, it's more important to get it right than to be right. And my colleagues know that about me. It varies, and I like that part of the question, is it varies from circumstance to circumstance. And that's the great part of being a leader, is you have to know when to pivot and how to pivot. I think I've had enough experiences in my 23 years in leadership roles where I've learned how to hone into that and do it with grace and dignity with anyone that I'm in encounter with.
Thank you. What are the key elements needed to establish and maintain a good working relationship between you and the board?
Well, the first thing is we need to get to know each other. It is about knowing each other as humans and understanding our roles and how they differ and how they're the same in many ways. The working relationship comes in with looking and reviewing, and I noticed you have a lot of this up on your board site, but knowing what each of our roles and responsibilities are and building that trust and relationship, that you empower the superintendent and their team to do the work that needs to be done. And that there's such a comfortable relationship that you're okay trusting, and then you're also okay for clarification. And it's not tense. It's not about tension or being defensive. It's about being clear and having an understanding. That takes time, but it's the single greatest thing that we need to do as educators is to make sure that the educators and the Board of Education are working as one, with the same vision and goals, and making sure that is what we do. And it takes time. It's learning each other's dance, style. Some of you are gonna have different communication styles. I need to learn them, and I might have boundaries. So it is really getting to know what our roles and responsibilities are, living into them, but with the same core value, which is doing what's best for kids.
Thank you. How do you inspire and engage the entire school community in support of the district's vision and mission?
It needs to be that living, breathing statement. I mean, I'm going to give you a packet before I leave, but you'll notice that I have it on 2 documents when you turn the page, the first and second page. Like it has to be out there, and that part of your vision and mission can align nicely with your comprehensive professional development plan. It aligns nicely with strategic. It's part of your strategic plan. It aligns nicely with your school improvement plans, but it can't just be words. And so part of living that is making decisions, modeling how we perform and treat each other, to to bring that vision and mission to life, that this is a great place to be. This is a community that is inclusive, that embraces diversity, that wants all, and all means all. So it is living, you have to live and demonstrate into those words. Again, I don't believe in having things that aren't something we are doing. And so you have to see it play out in every single building. You have to see it play out when kids get on the bus in the morning. And you have to see it play out in the lunchrooms. You have to see it play out on the athletic fields, on stages. You have to see that playing out on a very regular basis. And when there are things that occur that challenge the vision and mission, what do we need to do? How do we examine that so that we pivot and make adjustments to do that, or make corrections to make it happen? And so you're always living and growing into that.
Thank you. We'd like to take a few minutes now to provide you with an opportunity to ask any questions you might have for the board.
One thing that I like to ask boards, because you are the community, you live in the community and you're the eyes and ears of the community, what are some things that you hear your neighbors or friends that are super excited about? At least one good thing that they're super excited about being in the district, but what are some current concerns or areas of growth that they would like to see? And you can pick one or the other.
Anybody want to take that on?
Answer the last, where am I? I don't want to hog the question.
That's all right, go for it.
Let's see here. Some things that people are excited about, some things that people want to see improvement on. Is that, did
Yeah, or
that capture
growth,
correctly?
or, yeah.
Okay. A lot of people are, some of the things you mentioned, a lot of people love the resources that we have in this district, some of the unique attributes, the farm, the nature center, all those types of things. So people get really excited about that, and I think it's about trying to find ways to utilize them more effectively. There are some things that happen interaction-wise with those facilities that, I'm speaking from a younger parent point of
Sure.
view. Some others can speak from the older parent point of view, but I just know from talking to my peer younger parents, more elementary school age, they get really excited about that. That's very shiny and bright and different from a lot of other districts. Things I hear from other parents, concerns and opportunities for improvement are declining in this realm of the discussion about test scores and rankings within the state, is that there's a false sense within our district and our community that we have this elite performance. Some people differ on what is the true measurement of performance. It depends on personal values in that situation. But some people are disappointed that they were attracted to this district for that feeling that there was a sense of an elite education, and some don't feel that it's delivering on that. So that's the feedback that I'm hearing from the community.
Thank you.
Anybody want to add to that?
I could add to that. So one of the great things about our community, and could be one of the most challenging things of our community, is we have a very engaged and passionate community in terms of, just involvement, in terms of really wanting to know everything that's going on. That's great in terms of volunteerism, in terms of passion, but at the same time, then things that are happening in the district, community members come back and they obviously have a point of view, and they have stakeholders and they have input. And one of the things that can be challenging is you have various levels of input, and some may be conflicting. So as a leader of the district, one of the things that's very, very important is to take a stand and stand by that and provide the why, as opposed to, as a leader, telling everyone what they want to hear.
Exactly. Thank you. How many minutes do we have left, John?
We have
22 minutes.
Any more questions, or does anyone
Okay,
else?
yeah,
want to-
any more questions for the board?
So one thing that I can't help to think about because it's exciting, but it also is, how is the construction going right now? Do you guys have a good feel on where that's at?
Yeah, so there is a bond subcommittee. The spending is on track, the construction is on
Great.
track. Our schools are coming online in the fall,
Mhm.
and so everything's green as far as that goes.
Great.
The bond was split into two phases.
Yep.
The first phase is focused on the school buildings. The second phase was focused on other ancillary improvements, including the transportation center and other facilities. But as far as the elementary and middle schools go, everything's on track to come online in the fall. And of course, there's a lot of challenges to go with that.
Yeah.
And the building and the facilities part is one bit, but it's the logistics and the operational aspect of staffing that the community's worried about, parents are worried about, and we're worried about, and the
Yeah.
administration's worried about.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's normal. Thank you. I don't have any further questions.
All right. So we have about, 18 minutes remaining. Is there anything you'd like to add from your side?
Sure, yeah, I do have a closing statement that I'd
Please.
like to share. I do want to say thank you for inviting me in. This is really exciting, and a very exciting district. There's so many wonderful things going on. I'm incredibly proud to be a public educator. I'm an advocate and will always be an advocate for educators and kids. And I'm fortunate to have had a career that's led me down a lot of diverse paths, and I'll continue to work hard in any institution in education. I'm very grateful for my short time in consulting because it's given me a perspective across the state of Michigan and gave me another opportunity that I don't always have time for, to work with the Michigan Department of Education and see from a different lens. But there's still a lot of work to do. And I'm energized by the opportunities in the educational landscape that the Bloomfield Hills schools provide for children. I understand the challenges and pitfalls in schools and really any organization. But Bloomfield Hills, I truly believe, has the foundation and heart to embrace challenges and turn them into assets. The key is to believe in the power of working as a team. We cannot operate in separate silos. School districts are large operations that have to work as one continuous team. Sometimes it means breaking things from big to small into digestible bites, and that takes time, but that time spent is well spent. It's truly about living into the vision and your mission, using that to align every decision you make to elevate student growth and achievement at its very core. This is what I know to be true, and I'm confident that I can help guide Bloomfield Hills schools to that next level. The values and skill sets that I'll bring to the district is a wide range of experience in developing policies and strategic plans, complying with state and federal regulations, representing the school to the public and local boards of education, with building strong alliances. I have an expertise in identifying missing systems and subsequently developing and implementing sustainable systems that instill accountability. Effective executive influence skills with the ability to persuade key stakeholders of the benefits of program implementation, the value of change, and reasons to examine alternatives. I have a deep, deep commitment to provide deep commitment to education and to a proven track record of elevating the education experiences for all students. This commitment feeds my passion and fuels my unwavering drive to serve education and, most importantly, kids. I'm motivational and build strong relationships and management skills that reinforce a collaborative work environment focused on pursuing excellence at all levels and ensuring that goals are achieved. I have a strong reputation for my integrity, and that is most important to me, professionalism and relentless follow-through. I'm certain that my background and experience could be an asset to the Bloomfield Hills schools and the learning community at a whole. I want to thank you again for inviting me in. It's a pleasure to be part of education, and I hope that I get an opportunity here in the Bloomfield Hills schools. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Diglio, we appreciate your interest in the superintendent position
Thank you.
for Bloomfield Hills Schools. The board's interviewing 5 candidates this week. We will let you know Thursday night where you stand in our search process. Thank you for your participation in this first round interview.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hi.
Nice to meet you. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
That's all right. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Thank you. Thanks, John. Good to meet you. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. And can I have an extra copy for Michelle?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Have a great night.
You too.
Thank you, you too.
Appreciate it.
All right, with that, we wrap up agenda item 3B and move to agenda item 4, public comment. Rebecca, do we have any public comment today? All right, with that, we adjourn the meeting for this evening. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.